He gave me 5 minutes to sign, or he would have me locked in a facility by sunrise. My father thought the word committed would make me obedient again. He did not know I had already bought the one thing he could not yell his way out of: his debt. I let him finish his wine and served him something colder than revenge. A default notice. By the time he realized I was his creditor, it was too late. My name is Avery Parker, and I sat across from the man who had spent 31 years convincing me that I was small. The dining room of the Parker estate had not changed since I was a child. It still smelled of lemon polish, old dust, and the metallic tang of fear. The mahogany table was long enough to seat 20, yet there were only 4 of us tonight. My mother, Elaine, sat to my left, shrinking into her high-backed chair as if she hoped the upholstery would swallow her whole. My brother, Noah, sat opposite her, staring at his empty plate, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table, and at the head, looming like a gargoyle carved from malice and expensive tailoring, was my father, Graham Parker. He did not look like a man on the brink of ruin. He looked like a king holding court. He adjusted his silk tie, the fabric rustling in the dead silence of the room, and placed a small silver object on the table between us. It was an antique chronograph, a stopwatch he used for horse races, with a deliberate, agonizingly slow movement. He pressed the button. The second hand began to sweep. Tick, tick, tick. I have 5 minutes. Avery, he said. His voice was a low rumble, the sound of a storm that had been battering our coastline for decades. You have exactly 5 minutes to pick up that pen and sign the transfer documents. You sign over full control of your shares and your voting rights to me. If that timer hits 0 and that paper is blank, I make a phone call. I did not blink. I did not look at the papers he had slid across the polished wood. I kept my eyes on his face. What happens when you make the call? Graham? I asked. I did not call him Dad. I had lost the right to that softness years ago. Or perhaps he had lost the privilege of receiving it. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. It never did. Doctor, Kellen is on standby. He has already prepared the necessary affidavits. We have a bed waiting for you at the Pines. Involuntary commitment. Avery, for your own safety. Of course, you have been acting erratic, unstable, the stress of your little failed marriage, the delusion that you can run a business. It is clearly a manic episode. I am doing this because I love you. The lie hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Involuntary commitment. It was his favorite weapon. He thought the word committed would make me obedient again. He thought the threat of a locked room and sedation would turn me back into the terrified girl who used to hide in the pantry when his voice got too loud. He was watching me closely, waiting for the flinch, waiting for the tears. He wanted to see the cracks in my armor so he could drive his wedge in and shatter me. But I was not that girl anymore. I looked at the crystal goblet in his hand. It was filled with a deep, ruby red wine, a 1982 vintage. If I was not mistaken, probably $3,000 a bottle. He swirled it gently, savoring the bouquet, confident that he had already won. He took a sip, closing his eyes in performative ecstasy. I watched him swallow and felt a cold, sharp amusement curl in my gut. Enjoy it. Graham, I thought, that is the last expensive thing you will ever taste. The room was silent except for the ticking of the chronograph. Tick, tick, tick. My mother let out a small, strangled sob and pressed a napkin to her mouth. Noah looked up at me, his eyes pleading. He wanted me to sign. He wanted the tension to end. He wanted to survive dinner. I picked up my silver fork. It was heavy, ornate, engraved with the Parker family crest, a lion devouring a serpent. I turned it over in my fingers, feeling the cold metal. Then, with a sudden, violent motion, I dropped it. Clink. The sound was sharp and jarring, like a gunshot in a library. My mother jumped in her seat. Gasping, Noah flinched. Graham stopped swirling his wine. His eyes snapped open, narrowing into slits. You are wasting time, Avery, he hissed. 2 minutes left. I leaned forward. resting my elbows on the table, violating one of his cardinal rules of etiquette. I looked him dead in the eye. "Dad, you are confused," I said. My voice was level, void of any tremor. It was the voice of a stranger. It was the voice of the person who had spent the last 5 years building a hospitality empire from the ashes he had left me in. He scoffed. "Confused? I am the only one at this table who sees reality. Sign the papers." I shook my head slowly. I did not come here to surrender. I said, "I came to deliver consequences." I reached down beneath my chair. Graham stiffened. Perhaps he thought I had brought a gun. In a way, I had. I pulled out a black leather binder, 3 inches thick, heavy with legal devastation. I did not slide it. I lifted it with both hands and slammed it down onto the center of the table. Bam! The plates rattled. The wine in Graham's glass sloshed dangerously close to the rim. The sound was final. It sounded like a coffin lid slamming shut. "What is this?" Graham demanded, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. "Read it," I said. He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "I do not need to read your little diary. Avery, my lawyer has prepared everything. Every loophole is closed. Every asset is shielded. You have no way out. You have no leverage. You are nothing but a little girl playing dress-up in a business suit." I waited for him to finish. I let his insults wash over me, feeling absolutely nothing. They were old bullets, and I was bulletproof. "You are right," I said softly. He smirked. "Finally. You admit it. You are right." I repeated, "Your lawyer prepared everything. He did an excellent job. He prepared everything for you to lose faster." The smirk faltered. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. It was the first time tonight he looked unsure. "What are you talking about?" I reached out and flipped the binder open. The first page was not a plea for mercy. It was a photocopy of a document he knew very well, but one he never expected to see on this table. "I know about the bridge loan. Graham," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. The color drained from his face so fast, it looked like the blood had simply evaporated. $33.6 million. I continued, reciting the number like I was reading a grocery list. "Due in full within 48 hours. You leveraged your voting shares in Parker Crest Holdings as collateral, because no bank would touch you. You went to a predatory lender, a bridge fund that specializes in hostile takeovers. You thought you could flip the new resort project before the note came due, but the zoning permits were denied last week. Were they not?" Graham gripped the edge of the table. "How do you know that?" he whispered. "That is confidential. That is sealed." I ignored him. "The terms of the loan are aggressive." I said, "Upon default, the lender assumes immediate control of the collateral, meaning they get your shares, they get your vote, they get the company, and since you have a cross-default clause with your personal assets, they get this house too." He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "You are lying," he shouted. "My lawyer assured me that debt was private. I have time. I have until Friday. Today is Wednesday." "Graham," I said, remaining seated. "And the lender does not care about your excuses. They care about their money." He was breathing hard now, his chest heaving. He looked at the timer. It was still ticking, but he had forgotten it. He looked at Noah, then at my mother, looking for an ally. He found none. He looked back at me, his eyes wild with a mixture of rage and panic. "So what?" he spat. "You found out I have a cash flow problem. Big deal. I will call the lender. I will renegotiate. I have friends in that firm." "No," I said. "You do not." "I do," he roared. "I will call them right now. You cannot renegotiate with them." "Dad," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming colder than the air outside. "Why not?" he screamed. "Because they do not hold the debt anymore." I said. He froze. "What?" "They sold it," I said. "Distressed debt is a commodity. It gets bought and sold every day, and at 5:00 this afternoon, the bridge fund offloaded your entire loan package to a special purpose vehicle, a shell company." He stared at me, his mouth slightly open, He was trying to process the information, trying to find the angle. Who? He asked. Who bought it? I stood up then. I smoothed the front of my dress. I looked him in the eye, and for the first time, I let him see the steel. I let him see the shark he had created. I leaned over the table, placing my hands flat on the mahogany. Right next to the binder, I owned the note. 4 hours before I sat at the dining table watching my father play with a stopwatch. I was standing 20 floors above the city, staring at a stream of digital numbers that would have made the old Avery Parker faint. The air conditioning in the executive suite of North Star Meridian Hospitality was always set to 68 degrees. It was crisp, sterile, and smelled faintly of orchid water and ambition. I stood with my forehead almost touching the floor-to-ceiling glass, looking out at the skyline that was slowly turning purple with the coming twilight. But my eyes were not focused on the sunset. They were locked on the thin LED ticker running along the bottom of the Bloomberg terminal mounted on the south wall. North Star Meridian. Valuation estimated at $580 million. I read the number again. $580 million. It was a number so large it felt abstract, like the distance to the moon. But it was real. It was brick and mortar, intellectual property, brand equity, and the sweat of 5,000 employees. It was the sum total of every sleepless night, every risk, and every drop of pride I had swallowed to get here. I looked at my reflection in the glass. The woman staring back was wearing a tailored cream suit that cost more than my first car. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, immaculate bun. Her posture was rigid, a habit formed from years of bracing for impact. I placed my hand against the cool glass, covering the reflection of my own face. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel it. Victory, not the loud, champagne-popping kind, but the quiet, bone-deep satisfaction of survival. I had not just survived, I had thrived in the very jungle my father said would eat me alive. Then, the phone on my desk buzzed. It was a single, short vibration against the mahogany surface. It was a sound I heard 100 times a day, usually signaling a calendar reminder or an email from a regional manager. But this time, the sound felt different. It felt heavy. It felt like a stone dropped into a still pond. I walked over and picked it up. The screen lit up with a name I had not seen pop up in months. Graham Parker. I did not have him saved as Dad. I had changed that contact name 3 years ago, after he threatened to sue me for trademark infringement over the logo of my third hotel. I swiped the notification open. There were no pleasantries, no congratulations on the valuation news, which was surely circulating in his circles by now. No question about how his daughter was doing, just a command, written with the brevity of a general addressing a subordinate. Family dinner, 7 in the evening, do not be late. I stared at the screen until the backlight dimmed and went black. My heart did the traitorous thing it always did when he reached out. It skipped a beat, a physical manifestation of a childhood reflex I could not seem to exercise. My stomach tightened. The air in the room suddenly felt thinner, harder to breathe. 7 in the evening. He knew my schedule. He knew I had a board review tomorrow morning. He knew calling a dinner on such short notice was a deliberate disruption. But it was not just a disruption. It was a test. I set the phone down, face down, and walked back to the window. The city lights were flickering on now, a grid of gold against the darkening blue, but the view dissolved, and suddenly, I was not in my high-rise office anymore. The memory clawed its way up, vivid and nauseating, pulling me back 5 years. I was 26 years old. It was raining. A cold, miserable drizzle that soaked through my thin coat. I was standing outside the wrought iron gates of the Parker estate, the same gates I had driven through earlier tonight. My key fob did not work. The keypad was dead to my code. I pressed the intercom button again, my thumb slipping on the wet metal. Dad, please, it is raining. Just let us in so we can talk. The speaker crackled. But it was not my father's voice. It was the head of security, a man who had known me since I was in pigtails. I am sorry. Miss Avery, he said, his voice tinny and apologetic. "Mister," Parker gave strict instructions. "You are not to enter the premises." "Why?" I screamed, abandoning dignity. "Because you chose him," my father's voice cut in, overriding the guard. It boomed from the speaker, distorted but unmistakable. "I told you. Avery, you marry that useless dreamer, that bricklayer, and you are no daughter of mine. You want to live in his world? Go ahead. See how long you last without my credit cards. See how long he loves you when you have nothing to offer but yourself." The intercom clicked off with a finality that echoed in the empty street. I turned around. Ethan was waiting in our beat-up Honda Civic, the engine idling rough. He watched me walk back to the car, soaking wet, defeated. He did not say "I told you so." He did not look angry. He just leaned over and opened the passenger door. We drove away in silence. That night, we slept on a mattress on the floor of a studio apartment in Queens that smelled of mildew and old frying oil. We had $400 in our joint bank account. My father had frozen my trust, canceled my cards, and blacklisted me from the family firm. I remembered the months that followed like a fever dream. The success montage the magazines liked to write about, the glossed-over story of a young couple pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, left out the grit. They left out the nights I sat on the bathroom floor crying because we had to choose between paying the electric bill or buying paint for the lobby of our first project. They did not write about the ramen noodles we ate for dinner 3 weeks in a row. They did not write about Ethan, a man with a master's in architecture, on his hands and knees sanding the floorboards of a derelict motel because we could not afford a contractor. They did not see him come to bed with dust in his hair and blisters on his hands, too tired to speak, yet never once blaming me for the fortune I had cost him. My father called Ethan a useless dreamer, but Ethan saw potential in places everyone else had abandoned. He saw the bones of a boutique hotel in a rotting brownstone. I saw the numbers. We were a perfect machine. I worked the front desk from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. I cleaned the toilets. I did the bookkeeping on a laptop that crashed every hour. I called vendors and begged for extensions on invoices. I learned to negotiate not with the leverage of the Parker name, but with the desperation of a woman who had nowhere left to fall. I remembered the first time we turned a profit. It was $82.50. We bought a bottle of cheap wine and drank it out of coffee mugs. Sitting on the roof of the hotel, looking at the Manhattan skyline in the distance, "We are going to buy that city one day," Ethan had said. Pointing at the lights, I believed him. But more importantly, I believed in the anger that was burning a hole in my chest. It was a clean, hot fuel. Every time my father's voice echoed in my head, telling me I was incompetent, telling me I was nothing without him, I worked an hour longer. I double-checked a spreadsheet one more time. I refined a service protocol until it was flawless. Now, 5 years later, that $82 had turned into $580 million. I blinked, bringing myself back to the present. The office was quiet. The hum of the server room was the only sound. I looked at the phone again. Family dinner. Why? Graham Parker did not do family dinners. He did business meetings disguised as meals. He did ambushes. He did public humiliations. But he did not break bread for the sake of sentiment. If he was calling me back after 5 years of radio silence, after watching me rise from the ashes he created without lifting a finger to help, it was not because he missed me. He had ignored my wedding invitation. He had ignored the birth announcement of my first big contract. He had ignored the article in Forbes that called me the new face of hospitality. He was a shark. Sharks do not swim backward unless they are trapped. I walked over to the desk and picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over Ethan's contact. The instinct was to call him, to hear his calm voice, to tell him. He contacted me. I'm scared. But I stopped. If I called Ethan, he would tell me not to go. He would tell me we did not need him. He would remind me that we were happy, safe, and successful. He would want to protect me, but I did not want protection. I wanted answers. And deeper than that, a darker part of me wanted to see him. I wanted to walk into that dining room in my $3,000 suit, with my $500 million valuation, and look him in the eye. I wanted to see if the monster under my bed had shrunk. But I was not stupid. I was not the 26-year-old girl crying in the rain anymore. I was a CEO, and CEOs do not walk into meetings unprepared. I closed Ethan's contact and opened a different one. The name read, Marcus Vance, General Counsel. I pressed call. He answered on the second ring. Avery, it is 6 p.m. Is everything all right? I need you to look into something for me. Marcus, I said. My voice was steady, stripping away the emotion until only the directive remained. Name it, he said. I could hear the sound of him typing already. Graham Parker. I said, and Parker Crest Holdings. There was a pause on the line. Your father? Avery, we have strict separation protocols. You know, I know, I interrupted. But he just invited me to dinner. Tonight. The typing stopped. That is unexpected. Yes, I said. It is. Listen to me. Marcus, my father is a narcissist and a control freak. But he is also a pragmatist. He cut me off to teach me a lesson. In his mind, inviting me back before I came crawling to him on my knees is an admission of defeat. He would never do it, not unless the alternative was worse. What are you thinking? Marcus asked. I looked out the window again. The city was fully dark now. Somewhere out there, my father was probably decanting that wine, rehearsing his lines, thinking he was setting a trap. I think he's in trouble. I said softly. Financial trouble? Marcus asked skeptically. Parker Crest is a fortress. They have held prime real estate assets for 40 years. Fortresses crumble if you undermine the foundation. I said, I want you to run a full check, not just the public filings. I want you to dig into the debt markets. Look for liens. Look for judgments. Look for anything that does not sit right. Check the whisper networks. If he is selling things, if he is late on payments, if he is leveraging assets he should not be touching. I want to know, Avery, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a warning tone. If you go there tonight, do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. I have no intention of signing anything. I said, just be careful. He said, desperate men are dangerous. I know. I said, that is why I am calling you. I hung up the phone. I stood there for another minute, letting the silence settle around me. The fear was still there. A low hum in my nervous system, but it was changing. It was shifting from the paralyzed terror of a child into the cold, sharp focus of a predator. I walked to the closet in the corner of my office and pulled out my coat. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror again. The success montage was over. The struggle years were over. This was something else. This was the reckoning. I checked my watch. 6:15. I had 45 minutes to get to the estate. I grabbed my purse. As I walked to the door, a thought solidified in my mind. Crystal clear and cold as ice. It was the only logical explanation for the text message, for the timing, for the sudden breach of 5 years of silence. My father was not inviting me to dinner to make amends. He was not inviting me because he was proud. If he invited me, it was because he was drowning, and he looked at me and saw a life raft. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. I was not going to be his life raft. I was going to be the anchor. I sat in the back of my town car, the leather seat cool against my legs, watching the city blur into streaks of neon and rain. The partition was up. The driver knew better than to speak. My laptop was open on my knees, the screen casting a pale, ghostly light on my face. But I was not looking at spreadsheets anymore. I was staring at a black icon on my phone. A secure messaging app that I had installed on my brother's phone 3 years ago during a rare, unsupervised visit. We did not use text messages. We did not use email. In the Parker household, digital privacy was a myth. My father monitored the router logs like a prison warden, but this app was encrypted, disguised as a calculator, and it was our only lifeline. A notification popped up. A single word. Safe? I typed back immediately. Yes. What is happening? 3 dots danced on the screen, then vanished. Then appeared again. Noah was hesitating. I could picture him. A 28-year-old man hiding in the guest bathroom or the walk-in cedar closet, thumb hovering over the screen, terrified that the sound of his own breathing might give him away. Noah was the gentle one, the one who stayed, the one who absorbed the toxicity I had escaped, acting as a buffer for a mother who had long since stopped fighting. An image began to download. The progress bar crawled, hindered by the thick stone walls of the estate. He is selling things. Noah wrote while the image loaded. The Degas is gone from the hallway. He told Mom it was being restored, but the spot on the wall is clean, and the silver tea set from the display case, gone. My stomach twisted. Graham Parker selling the family heirlooms? That was not just desperation. That was heresy. He valued those objects more than he valued his children. They were the physical proof of his lineage, his armor against the world. To sell them meant he had exhausted every liquid asset he had. The image finally snapped into focus. It was a photograph of a piece of paper, crumpled and smoothed out again, as if someone had retrieved it from a wastebasket. The lighting was poor, likely taken with a shaking hand under a bathroom light, but the bold black header was unmistakable. Final notice of default and acceleration. I pinched the screen to zoom in. The letterhead belonged to a firm called Obsidian Bridge Capital. I knew them. Everyone in high finance hospitality knew them. They were not a bank. They were sharks who swam in the blood of distressed assets. They lent money to desperate developers at usurious rates, waiting for a single missed payment so they could seize the collateral. They did not want the interest payments. They wanted the property. I scanned the text, my eyes skipping over the legal boilerplate to find the numbers. When I found them, the air left my lungs in a sharp hiss. Principal amount, outstanding, $33,600,000. Interest and penalties, $420,000. Totals, immediately, $33.6 million. It was a staggering sum for a personal liquidity crisis. But what made my blood run cold was not the number. It was the paragraph below it, highlighted by the cruel clarity of the camera lens. Pursuant to the terms of the Master Credit Agreement, failure to cure the default within 48 hours constitutes an event of default under Section 4.2. The lender hereby exercises its right to immediate control and power of attorney over all pledged collateral, including but not limited to the borrower's Class A voting shares in Parker Crest Holdings. I sat back, the phone slipping slightly in my grip. This was it, the smoking gun. Graham had not just borrowed money against the house or his personal accounts. He had pledged his controlling interest in the family company, the company that held the deeds to 6 luxury properties, the company my grandfather had built, the company that was the source of his power and his identity. He had bet the crown jewels on a gamble, and he had lost. If he did not pay $33 million by tomorrow, he would not just be broke, he would be dethroned. Obsidian Bridge would step in, take his shares, vote him off the board, and strip the company for parts. I looked at the date on the letter. It was dated 2 days ago. The deadline was not next week. It was not Friday. It was sunrise tomorrow. A new message from Noah appeared. He has been pacing the study all night, drinking. He keeps calling a number he has written on a sticky note. I heard him say, "Dr. Kellen," over and over again. He is asking if the paperwork is ready. Dr. Kellen. The name triggered a faint, unpleasant memory. Dr. Kellen Rourke. He was a psychiatrist who catered to the wealthy families of the Upper East Side. He was the kind of doctor who specialized in discretion rather than healing. He was the man you called when you wanted a scandal managed, a prescription filled without questions, or a problematic family member silenced. The pieces slammed together in my mind with the violence of a car crash, the dinner invitation, the sudden desire for family unity, the default notice, the doctor. Graham did not invite me to ask for a loan. He knew I would never give him $33 million without conditions he could not accept. He knew I would demand an audit, oversight, and his resignation. His ego would never allow that. No, this was not a request for help. This was a robbery. He intended to have Dr. Kellen declare me unstable, involuntary commitment, If he could prove I was mentally incompetent, a danger to myself or others, he could petition for an emergency conservatorship. Even a temporary one would be enough. As my conservator, he would gain legal access to my assets. He could drain the liquidity from North Star Meridian to pay off his bridge loan, saving his own skin while locking me away in a medicated fog. He was going to cannibalize his daughter to save his kingdom. Rage, hot and white, flared in my chest. It was followed instantly by a cold, calculating clarity. It was the same feeling I got when a competitor tried to undercut my pricing or steal a vendor. He thinks I am the prey. I thought, he thinks I am walking into the lion's den. I picked up the phone and switched apps, dialing Marcus. He answered on the first ring. I found it. Avery. I know, I said, my voice razor sharp. Obsidian Bridge Capital. $33.6 million. Secured by his voting shares. There was a brief silence on the other end. How did you... Never mind. I do not want to know. Yes. The filing just hit the secured registry. It is toxic debt. Avery. High interest. Aggressive covenants. He is underwater. Is the paper for sale? I asked. What? The debt. Marcus, is Obsidian Bridge looking to offload it? They are always looking to offload risk, Marcus said slowly. If they think Graham is going to fight them in court, or if they think the bankruptcy proceedings will drag on, they might take a cash buyout. But why would you want to touch this? It is radioactive, because I do not want to forgive the debt. Marcus, I said, I want to own it. I looked out the window. We were passing the exit for the bridge that led to the estate. 10 minutes out. Here is what you are going to do, I commanded, my mind working like a chessboard. You are going to call Obsidian Bridge right now. Do not use my name. Do not use North Star Meridian. Use the shell company we set up for the acquisition in Miami last year. The one with the generic name. Blue Harbor Ventures. Avery. This is dangerous, Marcus warned. Offer them face value, I said, ignoring him. Wire the funds immediately. Tell them we can close in an hour if they assign the note to us tonight. Face value? They will jump at that. They probably expect to recover 70 cents on the dollar at auction. But Avery, $33 million of your personal liquidity. Do it, I snapped. And check the cross-default clauses, I added. If he defaults on this loan, does it trigger a default on his other obligations? Yes, Marcus said, the rustle of papers audible in the background. I am looking at the abstract now. It is a domino effect. If Obsidian, or whoever owns the note, calls the default, he loses executive privilege immediately. The voting rights transfer upon notice. Perfect, I whispered. One more thing, I said, my voice dropping. Look up Dr. Kellen Rourke. Find out his financial status, gambling debts, lawsuits, malpractice claims, anything. If Graham is leaning on him, it means the doctor is compromised. Find the leverage. I will put the investigators on it, Marcus said. But Avery, are you sure about this? You are buying a war. No, Marcus, I said, watching the iron gates of the Parker estate loom in the distance, illuminated by the headlights. I am buying the peace. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the tires on the wet asphalt. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I looked at the crumpled photo of the default notice one last time. It was not a tragedy anymore. It was a weapon. I typed one last message to Noah. Sit tight. Do not say a word. Do not rescue me. Just watch. I closed the laptop and slid it into my bag. I reached into my purse and pulled out a compact mirror. I checked my lipstick. It was a deep, blood-red shade. Appropriate. The car slowed down as it approached the guard booth. I rolled down the window. The same guard from 5 years ago was there. Older now, his face lined with gray. He looked at me, then at the car, then back at me. Recognition flickered in his eyes, followed by surprise. Miss Avery? He asked. Good evening. Thomas? I said coolly. I am expected? He nodded, fumbling for the button to open the gate. The heavy iron bars swung inward with a groan. As the car rolled up the long, winding driveway, lined with the ancient oak trees that had witnessed generations of Parker ambition, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. Graham Parker had set a trap. He had prepared the cage, hired the captor, and baited the hook. He was waiting for a scared little girl to walk through the door. He had no idea that the bank was walking in instead. My phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from Marcus. "Deal is in motion. The SPV is funded. We are sending the offer letter now. Give me 20 minutes to confirm the transfer." I smiled. 20 minutes. I could survive 20 minutes of small talk. The car stopped in front of the massive double doors. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of rain and old money. I stepped out onto the gravel, my heels crunching softly. I smoothed my jacket, squared my shoulders, and walked up the steps. I did not knock. I still had my key. I inserted it into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. I pushed the door open and stepped into the foyer. The house was silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Tick, tick, tick. Time was up. Dad. But not for me. The glass walls of the conference room on the 42nd floor were soundproof, which was fortunate, because the energy inside the room was loud enough to shatter a window. 30 minutes after I received the summons from my father, I had assembled my war council. It was not a family gathering. It was a tactical strike team. Marcus Vance, my general counsel, sat at the head of the oval table. To his right was Sarah Jenkins, a litigator who specialized in hostile takeovers and had a reputation for being a shark in a skirt. To his left was our chief financial officer, David Chen. No, not Chen. David Katz. I corrected myself mentally. There were no Chens in this story. David Katz was a man who saw the world in binary code, profit or loss. The air in the room was cold, filtered, and smelled of ozone and stress. On the smart screen behind me, a complex web of corporate structures was displayed. I stood at the head of the table, my hands resting on the cool granite. I did not sit. I did not have the patience to sit. "Tell me I can do it," I said. My voice was low, stripped of any inflection. I did not want reassurance. I wanted mechanics. Marcus tapped a stylus against his tablet. "Technically, yes. We have the liquidity. The bridge loan my team identified, the one held by Obsidian Bridge Capital, is distressed. We ran the preliminary checks while you were on the phone. Obsidian is nervous. They know Graham's liquidity is drying up. They know about the denied zoning permits. To them, holding that note is like holding a grenade with the pin pulled." He looked up at me, his eyes serious behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "They are expecting a default if we approach them with a cash offer for the full principal. They will not ask questions. They will take the money and run. They would rather have $33 million in the bank tonight than a 2-year court battle over a depreciating asset tomorrow. Can we buy the paper today?" I asked. David Katz cleared his throat. "Today? Avery, it is nearly 6 in the evening. Banks are closed. Wire cutoffs have passed." I turned my gaze to him. I did not blink. I do not care about banking hours. "David, we are not depositing a paycheck. We are buying a debt portfolio. Obsidian is a private fund. They have people working 24 hours a day. Find a partner there. Wake them up. Tell them we are offering par value for the note, effective immediately." David nodded, typing furiously. "I will make the call, but you cannot buy it as Avery Parker." Sarah interjected. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the hum of the room. "If Graham finds out his daughter holds the debt, he will claim conflict of interest. He will file an injunction claiming you are buying it solely to harass him. He will tie this up in probate court for years." "I know." I said, "We need a veil. We need a special purpose vehicle," Marcus said, swiping on the screen to open a new window. "A shell company. Something boring. Something that sounds like a pension fund or an insurance subsidiary. Something that does not raise red flags." I looked at the list of available shelf companies we kept for acquisitions. There were names like Vanguard and Apex. Too aggressive. Blue Harbor Ventures. I said, Marcus paused. It is neutral. It sounds like a retirement home in Florida. Use it, I commanded. Transfer the funds from the North Star holding account into Blue Harbor Ventures. Have Blue Harbor make the offer to Obsidian. Graham will see the name on the transfer notice and assume his debt was sold to some faceless hedge fund in Miami. He will not know it is me until I'm sitting at his dinner table. Sarah leaned forward, her expression grim. Avery, the debt is the sword, but you need a shield. You said he mentioned Dr. Kellen? My jaw tightened. Yes, if Graham is planning to have you committed, Sarah said. Speaking with the clinical detachment of a surgeon, he needs two things. 1, a medical opinion stating you are in imminent danger to yourself or others. 2, a triggering event. He is going to try to provoke you tonight. He wants you to scream. He wants you to throw a glass. He wants a public display of instability so Dr. Kellen can sign that affidavit. I walked to the window, looking out at the city that was beginning to light up. I remembered the way my father used to goad me when I was a teenager, picking at my insecurities until I snapped, and then pointing a finger and saying, "See? She is hysterical. He will not get a display," I said softly, "but we cannot rely on your self-control alone." Marcus said, "If Dr. Kellen is corrupt, he might sign the paper regardless of how calm you are. We need to discredit the witness before he even takes the stand." I turned back to the room. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, encrypted flash drive. I tossed it onto the table. It slid across the polished surface and stopped in front of Marcus. "What is this?" he asked. "Insurance," I said. I walked back to the table and leaned over. New York is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. Is it not, Marcus? He nodded slowly. As long as one person in the conversation knows it is being recorded, it is legal. I have been recording my father for 5 years. I said. The room went silent. David stopped typing. Sarah looked up, her eyes widening. Every voicemail he left me screaming that I was a failure. I continued. Every drunken phone call at 2 a.m. threatening to ruin my husband's career. Every time he told me he would crush me if I ever tried to compete with him. It is all there. Hours of it. I tapped the flash drive with my index finger. That is not the profile of a concerned father trying to help a sick daughter. I said, that is the profile of an abuser trying to silence a business rival. If Dr. Kellen files a single paper claiming I am mentally unstable, you release that audio to the press, the medical board, and the judge. You frame it not as a medical intervention, but as a corporate hostile takeover disguised as a family tragedy. Sarah smiled. It was a terrifying smile. That changes the game. If we file a preemptive motion to quash, citing malice and presenting these recordings as evidence of a pattern of abuse, Kellen will lose his license if he proceeds. Draft it. I said, have the motion ready to file the second I give the signal. I looked at the clock on the wall. 6:15. The strategy was set. The pieces were moving. Now came the execution. I turned to my assistant, who had been standing silently in the corner holding a garment bag. Is that it? She nodded nervously. Yes, Ms. Parker. I took the bag and went into the adjoining private bathroom. I stripped off the silk blouse and soft cashmere cardigan I had been wearing, clothes that were approachable, human. I opened the bag. Inside was a suit I had commissioned from a tailor on Savile Row. It was charcoal gray, cut sharp enough to draw blood. The fabric was stiff, military-grade wool. I put it on. I buttoned the jacket. It felt like locking myself into the cockpit of a fighter jet. I pulled my hair back tighter, securing it with pins that dug into my scalp. I needed the pain. It kept me sharp. I applied a layer of lipstick, dark and matte. When I stepped back out into the conference room, the conversation stopped. Marcus looked at me and nodded. He understood. I was not going to dinner as a daughter. I was going as a CEO. I walked over to the table where a black leather binder lay open. This was the payload. Inside were the documents Sarah and David had assembled in the last 20 minutes. Tab 1. The Debt Purchase Agreement. Transferring ownership of the $33.6 million loan from Obsidian Bridge to Blue Harbor Ventures. Tab 2. The Notice of Default and Acceleration. Tab 3. The Transfer of Voting Rights. Tab 4. A draft resolution removing Graham Parker as chairman of the board, effective immediately upon default. And Tab 5. A schedule of security protocols to revoke his access to the building, his company email, and his corporate accounts. I ran my hand over the pages. They were still warm from the printer. I closed the binder. It snapped shut with a heavy, final sound. I picked it up. It weighed about 4 pounds. 4 pounds of paper to dismantle a 40-year reign. I looked at Marcus. "Do not sleep tonight. We will be here," he said, "waiting for your text." I pulled out my phone. I had one last message to send before I went dark. I opened the encrypted chat with Noah. "At dinner. Do not rescue me." I typed, "Just watch, and stay safe." I put the phone away. I walked to the elevator, my heels clicking a rhythm of war against the marble floor. As the doors opened, I caught a glimpse of the digital ticker in the lobby. North Star Meridian Hospitality. Valuation, $580 million. My father used to tell me that he built me. He used to say that every good thing in my life was a crumb from his table. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the garage. "He thinks he built me," I whispered to the empty car. The doors closed, sealing me in. He built my appetite. The dining room of the Parker estate was not designed for eating. It was designed for holding court. I stepped across the threshold, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The room was a cavern of mahogany and velvet, lit by a crystal chandelier that had hung there since before the Great Depression. The walls were lined with portraits of dead men, my ancestors, who stared down with grim disapproval. Their eyes painted to follow you no matter where you sat. It felt less like a home and more like a museum dedicated to the preservation of old, decaying power. My mother, Elaine, was already seated. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if the house were slowly shrinking her, compressing her bones into dust. She wore a pale blue dress that washed her out, making her look like a ghost against the dark wood of the chair. Her hands were busy in her lap. She was twisting her linen napkin, winding it tight around her fingers until the tips turned purple, then unwinding it and starting again. She did not look up when I entered. She stared fixedly at the centerpiece, a sprawling arrangement of white lilies that smelled cloying and funereal. "Hello." "Mother?" I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence. She flinched. It was a tiny, sharp movement, like a bird hitting a window pane. "Avery," she whispered, finally risking a glance at me. Her eyes were wide, rimmed with red. She looked terrified. "You came. I told you she would come." "Elaine," the voice boomed from the head of the table. Graham Parker stood there, his hand resting on the back of his chair. He was wearing a dinner jacket, impeccable and severe. He smiled, but his teeth looked too white, too sharp in the dim light. "Sit down." "Avery," he commanded. I walked to the chair opposite Noah. My brother sat with his shoulders hunched, his hands clasped on the table in front of him. He looked up at me as I pulled out my chair. His face was pale, his jaw set tight. There was a message in his eyes, a desperate, silent communication. "I know what he is doing. I am sorry." I gave him a nearly imperceptible nod, acknowledging the text he had sent, acknowledging the secret we shared. Then I sat. The table was set for a 4-course meal, the silver cutlery gleaming under the electric candlelight. A server I did not recognize emerged from the shadows of the kitchen door, poured water into our glasses, and vanished again. We were alone. Graham picked up a bottle of wine from the sideboard. It was the 1982 Petrus. I recognized the label immediately. It was a bottle he had been saving for his 60th birthday or a major acquisition. Opening it on a random Wednesday night was a signal. He was trying to project opulence. He was trying to show me that nothing had changed, that the coffers were full, that he was still the king of this castle. But as he moved around the table to fill my glass, I saw it. He gripped the neck of the bottle tight, his knuckles white. As he tilted it over my crystal goblet, his hand gave a microscopic jerk. A tremor, wine splashed against the side of the glass, a single red drop landing on the pristine white tablecloth. Graham stared at the stain. For a second, his mask slipped. I saw a flash of pure, unadulterated panic in his eyes before he blinked it away. He hated imperfection. He hated loss of control. In the past, a stain like that would have resulted in a 10-minute lecture to the staff or a shouting match. Tonight, he just laughed. A dry, hollow sound. "Getting old," he muttered, topping off the glass. I watched the red liquid settle. I did not reach for it. He returned to the head of the table and sat down. He raised his glass. "To family," he said, "and to returns." He drank. My mother lifted her glass with a trembling hand and took a sip. Noah did not move. I stared at Graham. "You did not bring your husband," Graham said, setting his glass down. "What is his name again? Evan? Eric? Ethan," I said calmly. "Right. Ethan." He waved a hand dismissively. "The carpenter. Is he still playing with those little boutique renovations? I heard he was trying to turn a warehouse in Brooklyn into a luxury suite. Quaint. He is an architect." "Graham," I said, "and yes, the Brooklyn project just won the Pritzker equivalent for sustainable design." Graham chuckled, breaking a piece of bread with aggressive force. "Awards are for people who cannot generate revenue. Real businessmen do not need plaques. Avery, they need liquidity. They need assets." I picked up my water glass, watching him over the rim. "You would know all about liquidity. Wouldn't you, Dad?" His eyes snapped to mine. The air in the room grew tight, vibrating with tension. "I am doing just fine. Avery," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "Parker Crest has never been stronger. We are looking at a record quarter. That is actually why I invited you here. I wanted to see if you were ready to step up to the big leagues." He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "I have been watching your little company, North Star Meridian. Cute name. It sounds like a compass for Boy Scouts. It is valued at $580 million as of 4:00 this afternoon." I said. Graham waved the number away as if it were a fly. "Paper valuation. It means nothing until you exit. And let us be honest, Avery, you got lucky. You rode the post-pandemic travel boom. You found a few distressed properties and flipped them. That is not skill. That is catching a wave. But waves crash. He was baiting me. I could feel the heat rising in my neck, the old, instinctive need to defend myself, to scream, to pull out my portfolio and shove the spreadsheets down his throat. He wanted me to get angry. He wanted me to shout. He needed a reaction to justify what was coming next. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of lilies and old wax. I imagined myself as a stone in a river. The water rushes over, but the stone does not move. Market timing is a skill, I said, my voice flat. He sneered. "You sound like him, your husband, always justifying mediocrity with jargon. You know, I did you a favor cutting you off 5 years ago. I thought it would toughen you up, make you realize that you cannot build a legacy on dreams and love. But looking at you now..." He paused, scanning my face, looking for the crack. "You look tired." "Avery, I am fine," I said. "Are you?" He took another drink of wine, draining half the glass. "You look exhausted. Your eyes are shadowed. You are thin, too thin. Is everything all right at home? Is Ethan treating you well? I know how stressful it can be when one partner is successful and the other is struggling. It breeds resentment." He was probing, looking for a soft spot. He wanted to paint a picture of a woman on the edge of a breakdown. "Ethan is wonderful," I said. Graham checked his watch. He glanced at the gold face, his eyes lingering on the dial for a second too long. It was not a casual glance. It was a calculation. Tick, tick, tick. I knew exactly what he was counting down to. The deadline on the Obsidian Bridge loan was likely sunrise or start of business tomorrow. Every minute he spent sitting here was a minute closer to his total annihilation. He needed my signature, or he needed me committed, and he needed it tonight. "He thinks he is running out of time," I thought, watching him refill his glass. He does not know the clock already stopped. Why do you keep checking the time? I asked. Do you have somewhere to be? He froze, the bottle hovering over his glass. No, he said quickly, just anticipating the next course. The service here has gotten slow. He set the bottle down. Harder than he intended. It made a loud thud against the wood. Elaine jumped, her napkin tearing in her hands. Graham looked at my mother with sudden irritation. Stop fidgeting. Elaine, you are making me nervous. She dropped her hands to her lap immediately, bowing her head. Sorry. Graham. He turned back to me, his expression softening into a mask of grotesque. Paternal concern. It was a performance, and a bad one. I am worried about you. Avery, he said. Truly, I have been hearing things. Hearing things? I asked. Rumors, he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. From people in the industry, they say you are erratic in meetings, that you are paranoid, that you are firing staff without cause, that you are obsessed with the idea that people are spying on you. I stared at him. It was almost impressive how easily the lies rolled off his tongue. He was building the narrative for the medical file. Who says this? I asked. People who care, he said. I spoke to an old friend of ours. Dr. Kellen, you remember him? He treated you for that anxiety when you were in college. I remember. I said, I remember he prescribed me sedatives because I was stressed about finals, and you told him to double the dose so I would stop complaining. Graham sighed, shaking his head. See? That is what I mean. You are rewriting history. You're paranoid. Avery, you think everyone is against you. You think your father is the villain. He reached under the table. My muscles tensed. I saw Noah look up sharply. This is it, I told myself. The turn. Graham pulled out a manila envelope. It was thick, sealed with a red string. He did not slam it down like I had slammed my binder earlier. He slid it across the table. The paper made a dry, rasping sound against the wood. It stopped just inches from my water glass. What is this? I asked. Though I knew. It is help, Graham said softly. I looked at the envelope. I did not touch it. It is a treatment plan. He continued. Doctor, Kellen and I have been discussing your case. He agrees that you are exhibiting classic signs of a manic episode brought on by acute stress. You need rest. Avery, you need to step away from the company. You need to be somewhere safe, where you cannot hurt yourself or destroy what you have built. He leaned back, spreading his hands. I have arranged everything. A suite at the Pines, very private, very exclusive. You just need to sign the voluntary admission forms. And if I do not? I asked. He picked up his wine glass again, swirling the liquid. His eyes were cold. Dead things. Then it becomes involuntary. Avery, I have the affidavits. I have the doctor's signature. I have the witness statements. If you do not sign that paper and give me temporary power of attorney over your affairs while you recover, I will have to make the call. He checked his watch again. You have 5 minutes to decide, he said. The room was silent. My mother was weeping silently, tears tracking through her powder. Noah was staring at me, his face a mask of horror. I looked at Graham. I looked at the man who had terrified me for 31 years. I looked at the trembling hand holding the wine glass. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip. I did not feel fear. I felt like a surgeon looking at a tumor on a light box. It was ugly. It was malignant. But it was also clearly defined, isolated, and ready to be cut out. I did not reach for his envelope. I reached for my glass of water. I took a slow, deliberate sip. The cool liquid soothed my throat. I set the glass down. I looked him in the eye. You are projecting, Graham, I said. His smile faltered. Excuse me? You are the one who is unstable, I said, my voice calm, conversational. You are the one who is overworked. You are the one who is paranoid. I leaned forward. And you are the one who is broke. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Graham's face went slack. The wine glass in his hand tilted. What did you say? He whispered. I said, "I did not touch the envelope." I pushed it back toward him with my one finger. I said, "You are broke, and I am not signing anything." "But you are, Dad." I reached down and pulled my binder from the floor. "You are going to sign everything." I reached out and placed my hand on the manila envelope. The paper felt rough against my fingertips, a tactile contrast to the smooth, polished mahogany of the table. Graham watched me with the intense, predatory focus of a hawk circling a field mouse. He expected me to tremble. He expected me to recoil. I did neither. I slid the red string slowly to the side, unwinding the figure-8 knot with deliberate precision. I pulled out the stack of documents inside. The first page was a petition for emergency guardianship. It was drafted on the letterhead of his personal law firm, the same firm that had handled my grandfather's estate. The language was standard boilerplate legal violence. It claimed that Avery Parker was suffering from an acute psychotic break, that she was exhibiting dangerous financial behavior, and that she posed an immediate threat to the solvency of her family's legacy. I turned the page, and there it was, the clinical assessment. It was dated 3 days ago, a date when I was in a board meeting in Chicago, nowhere near the Upper East Side office of the man who had signed it. The diagnosis was a work of fiction so elaborate it almost commanded respect. Paranoid schizophrenia with manic episodes, dissociative fugue states, inability to distinguish reality from delusion. At the bottom of the page, scrawled in blue ink, was a signature I had not seen since I was 22 years old. Kellen Rourke, M.D., Ph.D. I looked up at Graham. The air in the room felt thick, almost gelatinous. "He has not treated me in years," I said. My voice was calm, curious, as if I were asking about the weather. "I have not stepped foot in his office since I graduated." "How did you get this?" Graham smiled. It was a tight, triumphant expression that showed too many teeth. He took another sip of his wine, the glass clicking softly against his teeth. "Doctors are men of science, Avery," he said, leaning back in his chair, "but they are also men of vice. And Doctor, Kellen has a particularly expensive vice." He swirled the wine. "Horses," he said, "not riding them, betting on them. And unfortunately for the good doctor, he is not very good at it. He owes a significant amount of money to people who do not send polite letters when a payment is missed. People who prefer baseball bats to collection agencies." I stared at the signature. "So you bought him," I stated. "I prefer the term sponsored," Graham corrected. "I agreed to cover his outstanding obligations. In exchange, he agreed to provide his professional opinion on your condition. He has known you for years. Avery, he knows your history. Who is a judge going to believe? A frantic, overworked young woman screaming conspiracy? Or a renowned psychiatrist with 30 years of experience who says he has been treating you remotely for months?" He pointed a finger at the papers in my hand. "That file is a loaded gun. Avery, if I file it with the court tomorrow morning, it becomes public record." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried across the table like a draft from a crypt. "Think about what happens next. The news hits the wires by noon. CEO of North Star Meridian committed. Hospitality heiress suffers mental breakdown. What happens to your stock price? Avery? What happens to your investors? They will flee. The board will suspend you pending an investigation. Your lenders will call in their loans. Everything you built will turn to ash in 48 hours. He paused to let the image sink in. "Or," he said, his voice lightening, becoming almost cheerful, "you sign the transfer papers I have right here. You transfer the voting control of North Star to Parker Crest Holdings. You check yourself into the Pines for a month, just for a rest. A spa trip, really. We tell the press you are taking a sabbatical for health reasons. Very respectable. I step in as interim CEO to stabilize the ship. The stock holds, the legacy is safe, and you get to keep your title. Eventually," he spread his hands, "it is a mercy. Really, I am giving you a way out with your dignity intact." I looked at my mother. Elaine was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. She was staring at me, her eyes wide and wet with tears. She shook her head slightly. A microscopic movement. Please, her eyes screamed. Just do what he says. Do not provoke him. You cannot win. I looked at Noah. He was looking down at his plate, his jaw clenched tight enough to snap a tooth. He hated this. He hated us. But he was paralyzed by the same fear that had kept this house standing for 40 years. I looked back at Graham. He looked entirely pleased with himself. He believed he had checkmated me. He believed the fear of losing my company would outweigh my hatred of him. He was right about one thing. I did care about my company. But he was wrong about the math. I closed the folder. I did not push it away. I rested my hand on top of it. I have a question, I said softly. Graham raised an eyebrow. Negotiating terms? Good. I am listening. No. I said, not terms, just curiosity. I looked around the room, at the heavy curtains, the dark portraits, the suffocating wealth that felt more like a prison than a privilege. Why did you try to destroy my life back then? I asked. Graham blinked. He looked genuinely confused. Back when? 5 years ago? I said. When I left with Ethan? When you cut me off? He scoffed. I did not destroy your life. I stopped subsidizing it. There is a difference. No, I said, keeping my voice steady. I am not talking about the trust fund or the credit cards. I am talking about the phone calls. I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. I know you called the banks in the city. I continued. I know you told them that if they lent money to Avery Parker or Ethan Hale, Parker Crest would pull its accounts. We had perfect credit. Yet 3 lenders denied our small business loan in the same week. Graham shrugged. He took a bite of his steak, chewing slowly. It is a small world. Avery, bankers talk. I know you called the general contractors. I said, we had a team ready to start on our first renovation. They quit the morning we signed the lease. The foreman told me he had received a threat that he would never work on a commercial project in Manhattan again if he took our job. I leaned forward. And I know you called the dean of architecture at Ethan's firm. You tried to get him fired. You told them he was stealing proprietary designs from Parker Crest. It was a lie, and you knew it. You tried to ruin a good man's reputation just because he loved me. Graham stopped chewing. He swallowed. He wiped his mouth with his napkin. A slow, deliberate motion. He did not look ashamed. He looked annoyed that I was bringing up ancient history. I did what a father has to do, he said. You tried to starve us. I said, you wanted us to fail so badly that you actively sabotaged us. Why? Was it just cruelty? Or were you that afraid I might succeed without you? He slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. Afraid? He laughed. A harsh, barking sound. You think I was afraid of you? You were a child. A spoiled, naive child playing house with a nobody. He pointed his fork at me. I did it to teach you. Avery, I did it to show you how the world really works. You thought you could just walk out of this house and be someone? You thought your last name would open doors even after you slammed this one shut? He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. He began to pace behind his chair, his voice rising. I wanted you to see that out there, in the real world. You are nothing without backing. You are nothing without power. I wanted you to hit rock bottom. I wanted you to come crawling back, hungry and humble, so I could build you back up the right way. He stopped and looked at me, his eyes blazing with a twisted conviction. I was not trying to destroy you. I was trying to break you, because you cannot mold steel until you melt it down first. I am the one who holds the ladder. Avery, you do not climb unless I say you can climb. You do not succeed unless I allow it. He gestured to the room, to the house, to himself. Everything you are is because of me. Even your little rebellion. Who do you think gave you that drive? Me? I pushed you. I squeezed you. And look at you now. You are a CEO. You are tough. You are sitting here negotiating with me. He leaned over the table. His face flushed. So do not ask me why I did it. Thank me for it. The silence that followed his outburst was absolute. My mother had her hands over her mouth. Noah was staring at his father with a look of pure revulsion. I sat perfectly still. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was the feeling of a heavy weight finally being lifted. For 5 years, a small, stupid part of me had wondered if there was some misunderstanding. If maybe he had just been hurt. If maybe he didn't realize the extent of the damage he had caused. But there it was. The confession, the justification, the absolute narcissistic certainty that his abuse was actually benevolence. He had just admitted to torturing his own daughter to satisfy his need for control. He had admitted to illegal interference with business contracts. He had admitted to blackmail. And he had done it all while the little red light on the digital recorder in my pocket was blinking silently. I looked at him. I looked at the man who claimed to be the architect of my life. He was not a king. He was not a titan. He was just a bully with a checkbook. And he was right about one thing. He had taught me a lesson. He had taught me that mercy is a weakness that predators exploit. I looked down at the fake medical file under my hand. I looked at the ultimatum he had placed before me. Sign or be destroyed. He thought he was offering me a choice, but I had made my choice 4 hours ago when I told Marcus to buy the debt. There was no hesitation left in me. No lingering daughterly guilt. No wish for reconciliation. I picked up the manila envelope, his weapon, and held it in the air. "You are right, Dad," I said. My voice was no longer the voice of the victim asking why. It was the voice of the executioner reading the verdict. He smiled. Thinking I was conceding, "I knew you would see reason. You taught me that the world is about leverage," I said. "You taught me that you do not climb the ladder unless you own it." I dropped the envelope onto the floor. It landed with a soft slap near his feet. "So I bought the ladder," I said. Graham frowned. "What are you talking about?" I reached for my black binder again. I opened it to the first tab. "I am talking about Obsidian Bridge Capital," I said. The color drained from his face instantly. The smile vanished. "I am talking about the $33,600,000 you owe them," I continued. "The money you borrowed to keep this house of cards standing. The money that is due tomorrow morning." Graham froze. "How do you—" "That is private. Not anymore," I said. I pulled out the notice of assignment. "I am the one holding the ladder now. Graham," and I'm about to shake it, "you love leverage." "Graham," I said, pushing the manila envelope back across the polished mahogany until it rested dangerously close to the edge of the table. "Let us talk about yours." The air in the room shifted. It was no longer the heavy, suffocating atmosphere of a family dinner gone wrong. It was the sharp, electric static of a negotiation room right before a hostile takeover. Graham looked at the envelope, then at me. His face was a mask of confusion that was rapidly hardening into fury. He did not understand. In his mind, the hierarchy was absolute. He was the father, the chairman, the titan. I was the daughter, the disappointment, the problem to be solved. The idea that I could have leverage was as foreign to him as the concept of failure. He leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles turned the color of bone. "Stop playing games, Avery," he snarled. His voice was low, vibrating with a menace that used to make me cower. "I am done with this charade. You have exactly 30 seconds to pick up a pen and sign the transfer agreement. If you do not, I am picking up this phone and calling Dr. Kellen. The orderlies are already on standby. Do you understand me? I will have you in a straitjacket before dessert is served." My mother let out a small, terrified whimper. "Graham, please," she whispered. "She is your daughter. Shut up." "Elaine," he roared, not breaking eye contact with me. I did not flinch. I did not blink. I felt a strange, cold detachment, as if I were watching a character in a movie rather than my own father. He was so small, so predictable. He was playing a hand he thought was a royal flush, unaware that I had already switched the deck. "Call him," I said calmly. Graham froze. "What? Call the doctor," I repeated. "Go ahead. But before you do, you might want to look at what I brought for show and tell." I placed my hand on the black leather binder that had been sitting on the floor by my feet. I lifted it onto the table. It was heavy. It landed with a solid, authoritative thud that silenced the room. Graham stared at it. Is that your little business plan?" He scoffed, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "Are you going to show me your projections? Your little boutique hotel spreadsheets?" "No," I said. I opened the binder. The sound of the ring snapping open was sharp in the silence. I turned past the cover page. I did not look down. I knew every word on the page by heart. I had memorized the clauses, the numbers, the dates. They were the coordinates of his destruction. I pulled out the first document. It was not a settlement agreement. It was not a plea for mercy. It was a formal legal notice, printed on heavy, bonded paper. I slid it across the table, right over the spot where he had spilled his 1982 Petrus. Read the header, Graham. I said. He looked down. He squinted, the candlelight reflecting off the glossy paper. I watched his eyes scan the text. I watched the exact moment comprehension struck him. It was physical. His breath hitched. His eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Notice of assignment and acceleration of debt. "What is this?" he whispered. The arrogance was leaking out of his voice, replaced by a dawning horror. I sat back in my chair, crossing my arms. 6 months ago, I began, my voice steady and clear, reciting the facts like a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. "You found yourself in a liquidity crunch. The zoning permits for the new resort in the Hamptons were stalled. The contractors were walking off the job because you had not paid them in 90 days. You needed cash, fast. But traditional banks would not touch you because your debt-to-equity ratio was already redlining." Graham looked up at me, his face pale. That is internal company business. So, I continued, ignoring his interruption. "You went to the secondary market. You went to Obsidian Bridge Capital, a lender of last resort, a predatory fund that specializes in distressed assets." I pointed to the document. "You borrowed $33,600,000. I said. The number hung in the air. My mother gasped. "33 million?" she whispered, looking at Graham. "Graham, tell me that is not true." He ignored her. He was staring at me, his eyes darting back and forth as if looking for an exit. It was a short-term bridge loan. I said, 6 months? High interest. But the terms were not the problem. The collateral was the problem. I leaned forward, locking my eyes on his. "You were so arrogant, Graham. You were so sure you could flip the permits and refinance before the note came due. So you gave them the one thing you swore never to risk. You pledged your Class A voting shares in Parker Crest Holdings as security against the loan." Graham's face went from pale to a sickly gray. He looked like a man having a cardiac event. "That is a lie." He stammered. "I never— That file is sealed. It is a confidential agreement. It was confidential." I corrected. "Until you defaulted." "I have not defaulted," he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "The deadline is tomorrow. I have until close of business tomorrow. I am working on a refinance package right now." "No," I said. "You are not?" I turned the page in the binder and slid a second document toward him. "This is the notice of default," I said. He looked at the paper. His hands were shaking so badly now that he could barely hold it. "How?" he choked out. "How do you have this? This is between me and Obsidian." I watched him struggle, like a fly caught in a web that was too strong to break. "Obsidian does not care about you, Graham," I said. "They care about risk management. They saw your financials. They saw the stalled construction sites. They knew you were going to miss the payment. So when a buyer came along this afternoon and offered to take the paper off their hands for full face value, they did not hesitate." "Buyer?" he whispered. He looked around the room, as if the buyer were hiding in the curtains. "Who?" he demanded. "Who bought it? Was it BlackRock? Was it Vanguard?" I allowed myself a small, cold smile. The buyer was a special-purpose vehicle. I said, "A shell company registered in Delaware, Blue Harbor Ventures." Graham blinked. I saw the recognition in his eyes. He had seen the transfer notification in his email earlier that day. He had assumed it was just another faceless fund trading debt. "Blue Harbor," he muttered. "I saw that name." The transfer was completed at 5:45 in the evening today. I said, the wire cleared at 5:58, just before you sat down to drink that wine. I stood up slowly. I wanted the height advantage. I wanted to loom over him the way he had loomed over me my entire life. Blue Harbor Ventures is fully owned and capitalized by a single shareholder. I said. I paused. I let the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. Me. Graham stared at me. His brain seemed to short-circuit. He opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again. You? He wheezed. You bought my debt? I own the note. Graham. I said, I am the lender. I am the bank. And as the holder of the note, I am exercising my rights under Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the credit agreement. I pointed to the bottom of the page. I am declaring the debt due and payable immediately. No. He shook his head, backing away in his chair. No, you cannot. There is a cure period. I have time. There is no cure period for a change of control default, I said, and since the lender, me, has determined that the security of the collateral is at risk due to your gross mismanagement. I am accelerating the payment. I placed my palms flat on the table. You owe me $33,600,000, Graham, and I want it now. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had just detonated, leaving a vacuum where the world used to be. Then, the explosion came. You little bitch! Graham screamed. He launched himself out of his chair. It happened in slow motion. The heavy dining chair tipped backward. Crashing onto the parquet floor with a deafening clatter, Graham lunged across the table, his face twisted into a rictus of pure, animalistic rage. He was not a businessman anymore. He was a cornered beast. He reached for the binder. He reached for the evidence of his failure, intending to tear it, burn it, destroy it. Give me that! He roared. That is fraud. You stole that. He grabbed the edge of the binder. I did not let go. I held it firm. My eyes locked on his. Let go! He screamed, pulling at the leather. Suddenly, a blur of motion came from the side. Noah, my brother, the quiet peacekeeper, the one who had spent 28 years making himself invisible, exploded from his chair. Dad, stop! Noah shouted. He threw himself between us, grabbing Graham by the shoulders. Noah was younger, stronger, but Graham was fueled by a maniacal adrenaline. They grappled for a second. A clumsy, violent dance in the center of the formal dining room. Get off me! Graham yelled, shoving Noah backward. You traitor! You knew about this! Noah stumbled but caught his balance. He did not back down. He stepped forward again, placing himself physically between me and our father. He held his hands up, palms out. Do not touch her, Noah said. His voice was shaking, but it was loud. It was the first time I had ever heard him raise his voice to Graham. Sit down, Dad. It is over. Graham stood panting, his chest heaving, his tie askew. He looked from Noah to me, and then to the binder that was still resting calmly on the table. He looked at my mother. Elaine was standing now, clutching her chest, her face the color of ash. Graham, please, she sobbed. Stop it. You are going to have a heart attack. Graham ignored her. He turned his gaze back to me. His eyes were wild, darting, desperate. You cannot do this, he spat, his voice trembling. You cannot just call a $33 million loan at a dinner table. It is illegal. I will sue you. I will bury you in litigation for the next 10 years. I picked up the binder and closed it. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria like a razor, you will not, because you signed a confession of judgment as part of the original loan package. His eyes widened. He had forgotten. Or perhaps he had signed it without reading, so arrogant in his belief that he would never default. It means I do not need to sue you, I explained. It means I can bypass the court proceedings and go straight to enforcement. And since the collateral for the loan is the controlling interest in Parker Crest Holdings, I paused, watching the reality sink in. I own your vote, Graham. As of 6 o'clock tonight, I control the board. I control the company. I looked at the chaos around the room, the overturned chair, the spilled wine, the weeping mother, the brother standing guard. And I control you, I added. Graham slumped. It was as if his skeleton had suddenly dissolved. He grabbed the edge of the table to steady himself. He looked at the medical file on the floor. The threat he had thought was so potent just 5 minutes ago. It looked like trash now. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. It wasn't love. It wasn't respect. It was total, abject defeat. But the night was not over. I had broken his defense, but I had not yet secured the surrender. He is not done. I thought. Watching his eyes dart toward his phone lying on the sideboard, he has one move left. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my own phone. I placed it on the table next to the binder. Go ahead, I said softly. Call your lawyer. Call Dr. Kellen. Call anyone you want. Graham stared at the phone. But tell them to hurry, I said, because the auditors are arriving at the Parker Crest headquarters in exactly 8 hours, and I think they are going to find some very interesting discrepancies in your accounting. Graham looked at me with pure hatred. You are bluffing, he hissed. You would not burn the family name. I am not burning it. Dad, I said, I am fumigating it. Fraud, Graham screamed, his voice cracking, shredding the dignified atmosphere of the room into jagged ribbons. This is fraud. You forged this. He grabbed the top document from the binder, the notice of assignment, and ripped it in half. The sound was loud, violent, and pathetic. He did not stop there. He crumpled the heavy bond paper in his fists, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple, veins bulging in his neck like cords of rope. He threw the ball of paper at me. It bounced harmlessly off my chest and landed on the floor. He reached for the binder again, intending to destroy the rest. I did not move to stop him. I did not lunge across the table to save the paperwork. I did not scream back. I simply watched him, my hands resting calmly on the table, observing his tantrum with the detached interest of an anthropologist watching a primate display dominance. Go ahead, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Yet it cut through his heavy breathing. Rip it all up. Burn it in the fireplace if it makes you feel better. Graham stopped, his hand hovering over the remaining documents. He looked at me, panting, sweat dripping down his temple. It is a lie, he yelled, though the conviction in his voice was thinning. You cannot just walk in here and claim my company with a piece of paper. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen once to wake it up. The brightness was set to low, but in the dim room, it illuminated my face. I had a message drafted and waiting in the queue. It was addressed to a group chat containing Marcus, Sarah, and the head of our external PR firm. The message consisted of a single word: execute. I pressed send. I watched the progress bar zip across the top of the screen. Delivered. I put the phone face down on the table. That binder is a courtesy copy. Graham, I said. He froze. The originals were filed with the Delaware Secretary of State 20 minutes ago. I continued. The notice of default was electronically served to your general counsel, your chief financial officer, and the entire board of directors at exactly 7 o'clock. The transfer of voting rights has already been recorded in the company ledger. I pointed to the crumpled ball of paper on the floor. You can destroy the paper, Dad, but you cannot destroy the blockchain of evidence that is currently hitting the inboxes of every person who matters in your world. Graham stared at me. He opened his mouth to speak, to threaten, to deny. But a sound interrupted him. It was his phone, lying on the sideboard where he had left it. Graham turned his head slowly to look at it. It vibrated against the wood. A relentless, angry hornet. The screen lit up. I could see the caller ID from where I sat. It was his personal attorney. He did not move to answer it. Bzzzt, bzzzt, bzzzt. The ringing stopped. Then, immediately, it started again. A different name this time. His chief of staff. Then it stopped, and started again. A board member. Then, A cascade of notifications began to flood the screen. The phone lit up and stayed lit, vibrating continuously, dancing slightly across the polished wood surface. It was a digital assault. It was the sound of a carefully constructed reality collapsing in real time. "Answer it," I suggested. "They are probably wondering why their chairman has been removed from the internal directory." Graham stumbled toward the sideboard. He picked up the phone as if it were a live grenade. He stared at the screen, his eyes widening as he scrolled through the barrage of messages. "Mr. Parker, we just received a notice from Blue Harbor Ventures. Please advise immediately." "Graham, what is going on?" "The secure portal says my access is revoked. Dad, the press is calling. They have a statement about a restructuring." He looked up at me, the phone slipping in his sweaty grip. "What did you do?" he whispered. The fight was gone. In its place was a hollow, terrifying realization. "What did you do?" "I told you," I said. Standing up and buttoning my jacket, I exercised my rights. I walked around the table, moving slowly, deliberately. "When you signed that loan agreement with Obsidian Bridge, there was a clause in the fine print. Section 9, subsection C. It is called the step-in right. It is designed to protect the lender's collateral." I stopped a few feet away from him. "It states that upon an event of default, which occurred the moment you failed to maintain the required liquidity ratios, unrelated to the payment deadline, the lender has the right to step in and exercise all voting rights associated with the pledged shares to prevent further devaluation of the asset." I took a step closer. "You were selling the art. Graham, you were selling the furniture. That is asset stripping. That is a violation of the covenant." That gave me the legal authority to trigger the clause immediately. I gestured to the phone in his hand. "I now control the votes," I said. "I possess 51% of the voting power of Parker Crest Holdings. I control the board. I control the bank accounts." I leaned in, my voice dropping to a steel whisper. "And I control your access." Graham looked at the phone, then at me, then at the room. He looked like a man who had woken up in a burning house and could not find the door. He turned to my mother. "Elaine," he pleaded. His voice was high, thin, unrecognizable. "Elaine, tell her to stop. Tell her she is crazy. This is our company. This is our life." Elaine Parker sat in her chair, her hands still folded in her lap. The tears had stopped. She looked at her husband, the man who had dictated her every move, her every spending habit, her every thought for 40 years. She looked at the man who had just admitted to sabotaging their daughter's life to teach her a lesson. She looked at the crumpled paper on the floor. "Elaine!" Graham shouted, desperation clawing at his throat. "Do something!" Elaine looked up. She met his eyes, and then she looked away. She turned her head and looked at the lilies in the center of the table. She said nothing. Her silence was louder than his screaming. It was a verdict. It was a lifetime of suppressed anger and fear, finally finding an outlet in passive resistance. She was not going to save him. She was going to watch him burn. Graham staggered back, as if she had slapped him. He looked at Noah. "Noah," he gasped, "you are my son. You are the heir. Do not let her do this. She is stealing your birthright." Noah stood up slowly. He looked at the chaos. He looked at the powerful, terrifying man who was now reduced to begging. Then he looked at me. There was fear in Noah's eyes. I saw it. He was looking at his sister, but he was seeing a stranger. He was seeing the woman who had walked into a lion's den with a binder and a cell phone and skinned the lion alive. He was seeing the ruthlessness I had cultivated in the cold, hard world outside these gates, but beneath the fear, there was something else. Awe, and perhaps, for the first time, respect. He leveraged the house. "Dad," Noah said quietly. Graham blinked. "What?" "You leveraged the house." Noah repeated. "Avery told me, if you lose the company, we lose the house. You gambled everything." "I did it for us," Graham yelled. "You did it for you," Noah said. Noah stepped back, aligning himself physically with the space between me and Graham. He was not standing with me, exactly, but he was no longer standing with him. Graham looked around the room. He was alone. Truly. Completely alone. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Marcus. Board resolution passed via written consent. You are interim chairwoman. Security is briefed. I looked at Graham. It is done, I said. What is done? He rasped. You have been removed as chairman and CEO of Parker Crest Holdings, effective immediately. I said, the board just voted. Since I hold the majority proxy, the vote was unanimous. No. He shook his head. No, you cannot fire me. I am Parker Crest. I built this. You inherited it. I corrected. And then you mortgaged it. I checked my watch. 7:10. The efficiency of the execution was brutal. Your company email has been deactivated. I listed off the casualties. Your keycard access to the headquarters has been revoked. The security team at the office has been instructed to deny you entry. Your corporate credit cards have been frozen. Graham looked at his phone again. He tried to unlock it, but his fingers were shaking too much. You cannot keep me out of my own building, he shouted. I can, and I have, I said. I turned and walked back to the table, picking up my binder. I did not need the courtesy copy anymore, but I was not going to leave my litter. You are permitted to enter the building tomorrow between 10 in the morning and noon, I said, turning back to face him. But you will be accompanied by a security escort. You may collect your personal effects, photos, plants, awards. You may not touch any files. You may not touch any computers. If you try to remove a single document, you will be escorted out by the police. Police? He sputtered. You would call the police on your father? If a trespasser tries to steal company property. Yes, I said. I walked toward the door. The sound of my heels on the parquet floor was the only rhythm in the room. Avery, he screamed after me. You will regret this. I will destroy you. I have friends. I have the media. I stopped at the doorway. I turned around one last time. He looked small. He looked old. He looked like a man who had spent his life building a fortress out of fear, only to realize too late that he had locked himself inside with the enemy. You do not have the media. Graham, I said, you have a default notice, and tomorrow, when the news breaks that you tried to have your daughter committed to cover up your insolvency, you won't even have your reputation. I looked at my mother. Good night, Mother, I said. She nodded, a tiny jerky motion. I looked at Noah. Call me later, I said. Then I walked out of the dining room. I could hear Graham screaming behind me, an incoherent stream of curses and denial. But as I walked through the foyer, past the grandfather clock that was still ticking away the seconds of his irrelevance, the sound faded. I stepped out the front door into the cool night air. The rain had stopped. The sky was clearing. I walked down the steps to my waiting car. The driver opened the door to the office. Ms. Parker? He asked. I looked back at the house. The lights in the dining room were still on. I could see the silhouette of my father pacing, a shadow trapped in a box of his own making. No, I said, take me to the headquarters. Which one? Parker Crest, I said. I had a new office to inspect. I stopped walking. My hand was hovering over the door handle of the town car. The cool metal wet with rain. Behind me, the heavy oak door of the manor had flown open again. Graham stood framed in the light of the foyer, looking like a silhouette cut from jagged black paper. You think you have won? He screamed into the night. His voice was raw, stripping away the last veneer of the composed patriarch. You think a few pieces of paper and a board vote are going to stop me? I turned around slowly. The driver looked at me, unsure whether to intervene. I held up a hand, signaling him to wait. I walked back up the steps, not because I was afraid, but because I knew my father. He was a man who believed in scorched earth. If he could not rule the kingdom, he would burn it down so no one else could sit on the throne. I stepped back into the foyer. Graham was panting, clutching his phone. His eyes were wide and manic. I have a contingency. Avery, he spat, backing into the hallway as I advanced. Did you really think I would rely on a single strategy? I am Graham Parker. I always have a backup. He tapped his phone screen aggressively. I have a reporter at the Journal on speed dial, he said. a twisted smile returning to his face. A very ambitious young woman who has been working on a profile of the Parker family for months. We have a story ready to go. It is titled, The Unraveling of Avery Parker. He laughed, a sound that bounced off the high ceilings. It details everything. He continued, your erratic behavior, your financial recklessness, the intervention we tried to stage tonight. It paints a picture of a grieving father trying to save his daughter from her own mental decline. And the best part? It includes the medical opinion of a respected psychiatrist stating you are unfit to lead. He held the phone up like a detonator. If I press send, the story goes live online in 10 minutes. By morning, your stock will be in freefall. Your investors will be calling for your resignation. You might own my debt, Avery, but I own your reputation. And in this town, reputation is the only currency that matters. I watched him. I watched the desperation disguised as power. He was right about the damage. A story like that, even if false, would stick. It would take months to clear my name. The board would get skittish. The valuation I had fought so hard for would bleed out. But I had not walked into this house hoping for the best. I had walked in preparing for the worst. I expected that. I said, my voice was quiet, almost bored. It stopped his laughter in its tracks. You expected what? He sneered. To be humiliated globally? I expected you to play dirty. I said, I expected you to weaponize the press, and I expected you to use Dr. Kellen Rourke as your bullet. I reached into my bag, not the binder this time, but my sleek, leather handbag. I pulled out a single, thin blue folder, so I removed the gunpowder. I said, I opened the folder. Inside was a sworn affidavit, notarized and stamped with the seal of the state of New York. You should really check in with your good doctor. Dad, I said, he has had a very busy afternoon. Graham stared at the folder. What are you talking about? I went to see Dr. Kellen this morning. I said, at his office. He was very surprised to see me. He was even more surprised when I showed him the private investigator's report detailing his gambling debts at the underground casinos in Atlantic City. $200,000. Graham, that is a lot of money for a man on a salary. Graham's face twitched. I gave him a choice. I continued. Stepping closer, I told him he could go down with you, be named as a co-conspirator in a fraud investigation, lose his medical license, and likely go to prison for falsifying medical records, or he could sign an affidavit admitting that you coerced him. I held up the document. The light from the chandelier hit the notary seal. He chose his license, I said. Graham shook his head, retreating step by step until his back hit the hallway table. No, Kellen would not turn on me. I own him. You rented him, I corrected, and I outbid you. I began to read from the document, my voice echoing in the silent house. Dr. Kellen Rourke, hereby attest that I have not treated Avery Parker in over 7 years. I further attest that Graham Parker approached me on January 15th, offering to settle my personal debts in exchange for a fabricated diagnosis of mental instability regarding his daughter. The medical file provided to Mr. Parker is a forgery created under duress and financial inducement. I snapped the folder shut. If that story runs, Graham, I said, I will release this affidavit to the medical board and the district attorney within the hour. The reporter will not be writing about my breakdown. She will be writing about your indictment for extortion and medical fraud. Graham slumped against the table, the phone in his hand lowered slowly. The threat neutralized. He looked like a man who had pulled the trigger and found the chamber empty, but the cornered animal was not dead yet. He needed a target. He needed someone to blame for the collapse of his universe. He spun around, his eyes locking on Noah. Noah was still standing in the dining room doorway, watching us. He looked exhausted, but he was standing tall. You, Graham hissed. He lunged toward Noah, pointing a shaking finger. You did this. You helped her. Noah flinched, but did not retreat. I did not. You traitor! Graham screamed, his voice shredding with rage. You are the only one who knew about Kellen. You are the only one who knew the schedule. You have been feeding her information this whole time. I fed you. I housed you. I protected you from the world, Because you were too soft to survive it. And this is how you repay me? By stabbing me in the back? He grabbed a vase from the hallway table, a Ming Dynasty porcelain that was likely worth $50,000, and hurled it at Noah. It smashed against the doorframe, shattering into 1,000 blue and white shards. Noah shielded his face, glass dusting his jacket. "Graham, stop!" Elaine screamed from the dining room. I stepped forward, ready to intervene. But Noah lowered his arm. He looked at the shattered porcelain on the floor. Then he looked at Graham, and for the first time in his life, the fear was gone. It was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "I am not a traitor." "Dad," Noah said. His voice was steady. "I am a witness." He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small, black ledger. It was battered, the spine broken. It was one of the old-school accounting books Graham insisted on keeping because he did not trust computers. Graham saw the book and went white. "Where did you get that?" "You left it in the study," Noah said. "You thought I was too stupid to understand what the numbers meant. You thought I was just the quiet son who played video games and stayed out of the way." Noah opened the book. "I know about the shell companies." "Dad," Noah said, "I know about the accounts in the Caymans, but that is not the worst part." Noah looked up, his eyes burning with tears he refused to shed. "You used my name," he said. The room went silent. "You set up the Cayman accounts in my name," Noah said. "You made me the signatory on the toxic assets. You made me the fall guy. If the SEC ever investigated, if the IRS ever audited those accounts, I would be the one going to prison, not you, me," Graham stammered. That was for tax purposes. "Noah, it was estate planning. I was building a nest egg for you." "No," Noah said. "You were building a shield for yourself. You were using your own son as a human shield for your dirty deals. You were willing to let me rot in a cell to protect your reputation." Noah threw the ledger at Graham's feet. It landed with a heavy thud amidst the broken porcelain. "I gave Avery the proof," Noah said, "and I am ready to testify." Graham looked at the ledger, then at Noah. He looked at me. The walls were closing in from every side. The legal system, the financial system, his own family. Everyone was turning against him. He looked at Elaine. She was his last hope, the silent, obedient wife who had weathered every storm, every affair, every scandal. "Elaine," he gasped. Tell them I did it for the family. Tell them I love them." Elaine Parker stood up from the table. She walked slowly into the hallway. She looked at the shattered vase. She looked at the ledger. She looked at her husband. She did not look afraid anymore. She looked tired, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that had been accumulating for 40 years. She stopped in front of him. "Graham," she said softly. He looked at her with hope. Yes. "Elaine, where's the money from my mother's estate?" she asked. The question hung in the air. Simple and devastating. Graham froze. The hope died in his eyes, replaced by terror. "What?" he whispered. "My mother left me $4 million in bonds," Elaine said. "It was in a separate trust. You told me it was being managed. You told me it was growing." She took a step closer. "I called the bank yesterday. Graham, after Avery called me." I looked at my mother in surprise. I had not called her. I had not warned her. She had sensed the storm coming on her own. She had woken up. "They told me the account was empty," Elaine said. "They told me the bonds were liquidated 3 years ago, with a forged signature." She looked at his hands. My signature. Graham. Graham opened his mouth. But no words came out. There was no defense. Stealing from his wife's inheritance was not business. It was not strategy. It was a betrayal so intimate, so absolute, that it dissolved the marriage contract in an instant. "You stole from me," Elaine whispered. "You stole from your children. You stole from everyone who ever trusted you." She turned to me. Her eyes were dry now. "Finish it, Avery," she said. Graham looked at her, stunned. "Elaine, don't speak to me," she said, turning her back on him. "You do not live here anymore." Graham stood alone in the hallway of the house he no longer owned, surrounded by the debris of his life. He looked at me. His eyes were full of hate. But it was the hate of a man who knows he is beaten. "You think you can just kick me out?" he snarled, trying to summon one last shred of bravado. "This is my house. My name is on the deed. Even if you control the company, you cannot touch my home. Homestead laws protect me. It will take you months to evict me. I will squat here. I will make this a nightmare for you." I looked at him. I almost pitied him. He was still trying to play checkers while the board had been flipped over. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Marcus. "Analysis complete. Clause 14, be confirmed. It is actionable." I looked at the message, then up at Graham. "I am afraid you are wrong again." "Dad," I said. I stepped over the broken glass. "When you signed the bridge loan with Obsidian, you were desperate. You were willing to agree to anything to get that $33 million. I held up my phone. "My lawyers just finished reviewing the fine print of the mortgage deed you cross-collateralized with the loan." I paused to let him hear the next words clearly. "There is a bad faith clause," I said. "It states that if the borrower is found to have committed fraud or material misrepresentation in securing the loan, like, for example, using a son's identity to launder money, or forging a wife's signature on securities, the lender has the right to bypass standard foreclosure proceedings." I looked him dead in the eye. "It is called an accelerated eviction for criminal malfeasance." Graham gripped the edge of the table. "No, yes," I said. I checked my watch. "It gives the lender the right to seize the physical property within 72 hours to secure the asset value." I smiled. A cold, humorless smile. "I am the lender, Graham, and I am securing my asset." I pointed to the door. "You do not have months. You do not have weeks. You have 3 days." I said, 3 days to pack 40 years of lies into a cardboard box and get out of my house." Graham looked at the walls, the portraits, the chandelier. He looked at the kingdom that was dissolving into mist. 72 hours. I repeated. I turned to Noah and Elaine. "Come on," I said. "Let us go." We walked toward the door, leaving him standing in the hallway. "Where are you going?" Graham shouted after us, his voice cracking with panic. "You cannot leave me here. We are going to a hotel," I said without looking back. "A hotel I own," I added. We walked out into the night. The rain had stopped, and the air was crisp and clean. Behind us, inside the mansion, I heard a sound. It was a long, agonized scream of rage. Then, the sound of something heavy crashing to the floor. The king had fallen. Now, we just had to bury him. Graham stared at me from the shadows of the hallway, his chest heaving. The reality of the 72-hour eviction notice hung in the cool night air like a guillotine blade. He looked at the driveway where the rain was starting to mist again. Then back at the interior of the house he had ruled like a tyrant for 4 decades. He realized I was not bluffing. He realized that when I said I owned the note, I owned everything attached to it. "Wait," he croaked. The word was barely a sound. It was a surrender. He stumbled back toward the foyer table, his legs giving out. He collapsed onto the antique bench that sat beneath the mirror, burying his face in his hands. "Come back inside," he whispered. "Please, we need to paper this." I looked at Noah and my mother. Elaine nodded once. A sharp, decisive movement. We stepped back into the foyer. I did not take off my coat. I was not staying. I was just finishing the job. I walked over to the table where my black binder still lay closed. I opened it to the very last section. This was the document I had hoped I would not have to use, but I had prepared it because I knew Graham Parker better than he knew himself. "I know why you are confused. Dad," I said, standing over him, "you thought the house was safe because it is in your name, but you forgot what you signed on page 42 of the loan agreement." He looked up, his eyes red and hollow. "You signed a cross-collateralization agreement," I explained, my voice echoing off the marble floors, "to get the interest rate down by 0.5 point. You listed the estate as a corporate asset of Parker Crest Holdings. You legally defined your home as an office extension to secure the capital." I tapped the paper, That means the house is not yours anymore. It belongs to the company. And since 5:58 this evening, the company belongs to me." He made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. It was the sound of a man realizing his own greed had built his coffin. I looked around the foyer. This house had always been a symbol of his power. It was where he intimidated suitors, where he impressed investors, where he silenced his family. Now, it was just an asset on a balance sheet, a distressed asset that I was about to liquidate. I pulled a pen from my pocket and placed it on top of the document. "Here is the new deal," I said. Graham looked at the pen as if it were a poisonous snake. "Option 1, I said. "I enforce the eviction. You leave in 72 hours with nothing but your clothes. I hand the evidence of the medical forgery and the embezzlement of Noah's identity to the district attorney. You spend the rest of your life in federal prison." I paused. "Option 2, you sign this." I slid the paper toward him. "It is an irrevocable letter of resignation," I said. "You step down from all positions at Parker Crest and its subsidiaries. You agree to a lifetime ban from the board. You sign a non-interference agreement stating you will never contact employees, vendors, or press regarding the company again." I flipped to the second page. "And you sign this confession," I added. "It states that you knowingly solicited a falsified medical diagnosis from Dr. Kellen Rourke to defraud the court and regain corporate control." Graham recoiled. "If I sign that, I am admitting to a crime." "This one stays in my safe," I said, "as insurance. As long as you disappear, as long as you go to your vacation home in Florida and play golf and never speak my name in public again, this confession gathers dust. But the second you try to launch a comeback, the second I see a quote from you in the papers, the second you try to sabotage Noah or me, I mail it to the prosecutor." Graham stared at the papers. His hands were shaking violently. He looked at the pen. He looked at the door. He looked at me. "You cannot do this," he whispered. "You will ruin the family name." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had terrified me for 31 years. I felt absolutely nothing. The fear was gone. The anger was gone. There was only a quiet, deep resolve. "You already did." "Dad," I said, "I am just turning the lights on." He flinched. The truth hit him harder than a physical blow. He picked up the pen. It took him 3 tries to get a grip on it. He signed the resignation. The scratch of the nib against the paper was the loudest sound in the world. He turned the page. He signed the confession. He dropped the pen. It rolled off the table and clattered onto the floor. "It is done," he whispered. "Not quite," my mother said. Elaine Parker stepped forward. She reached into her purse, a small, modest clutch she had carried for years. She pulled out an envelope. It was old. The edges yellowed with age. It smelled of lavender and secrets. She placed it on the table next to the resignation papers. "What is that?" Graham asked, wiping his eyes. "This is the deed to the lake house in Vermont," Elaine said softly. "The one my mother left me." Graham frowned. "I sold that. I sold that 10 years ago to pay for the expansion." Elaine shook her head. "No, Graham, you sold a forgery." The silence in the room stretched thin. "I knew you would try to take it eventually," Elaine said, "so I transferred the title to a trust in Avery's name the day she turned 18. I forged your signature on the transfer approval." She looked at him with a sad, pitying smile. "I learned from the best," she said. She pushed the envelope toward me. "It is yours." "Avery," she said. "It always was. It is the one place he never touched, the one place that is clean." I took the envelope. My hand trembled slightly. The lake house. I remembered it. It was the only place I had ever felt safe as a child. I thought it was gone forever. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered. Elaine turned to Noah. "Are you coming?" Noah looked at his father one last time. Graham was slumped on the bench, a broken statue of a fallen king. "Goodbye, Dad," Noah said. We walked out the door. This time, Graham did not scream. He did not run after us. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind us, sealing him in with his silence and his ghosts. We got into the car. The driver pulled away, the gravel crunching under the tires. I watched the house disappear in the rear-view mirror. It looked small from a distance. Just a pile of bricks and stone. We dropped my mother and Noah off at the hotel I owned downtown. I made sure they were settled in the penthouse suite. With room service on speed dial and security posted at the elevators, I hugged them both. Long, fierce hugs that said everything we were too exhausted to speak. Then, I told the driver to take me home, not to the headquarters, not to another meeting. Home. I unlocked the door to our apartment in Brooklyn. It was small compared to the mansion. The floors were scuffed. The paint was peeling slightly in the corner. But it was warm. It smelled of garlic, roasted chicken, and thyme. Ethan was in the kitchen. He was wearing a t-shirt covered in sawdust and an apron. He turned when I walked in. He saw the binder in my hand. He saw the exhaustion in my posture. He saw the look in my eyes that said the war was over. He did not ask if I had won. He did not ask about the money, or the company, or the voting rights. He knew those things did not matter. He turned off the stove and walked over to me. He wiped his hands on his apron and took my face in his palms. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I looked at him. I leaned into his touch. I felt the tension of 5 years, of 31 years, finally drain out of my body. "Yes," I said, and for the first time in my life, I meant it completely. I am free. Epilogue. 3 months later. The morning sun hit the steel and glass facade of the building on Fifth Avenue. I stood on the sidewalk, looking up. The old bronze letters that had spelled Parker Crest Holdings were gone. In their place, gleaming and modern, silver script, was a new name, North Star Meridian Group. It was not just a rebrand, it was a resurrection. I walked through the lobby. The staff nodded as I passed, not out of fear, but out of respect. I took the elevator to the top floor. Graham was gone. He was living in a condo in Boca Raton, subsisting on a stipend I approved monthly. He had not given a single interview. The confession in my safe kept him silent. Noah was running the philanthropic arm of the company, finally using the family money to build something other than ego. Elaine was living at the lake house in Vermont, painting again for the first time in 40 years. I walked into my office. It was the same office Graham had occupied, but it looked different. I had removed the heavy curtains. The room was flooded with light. I had taken down the portraits of the dead ancestors and replaced them with photos of my own projects, the ones Ethan and I had built with our own hands. I sat down at the desk. I opened the drawer and pulled out a small object. It was the antique key to the Vermont lake house, the one my mother had saved for me, the one thing Graham couldn't steal. I ran my thumb over the cold iron. My father spent his life trying to build a cage. He thought that if he made the walls high enough and the bars gold enough, I would never leave. He thought he could own me. He tried to lock me away. I closed my hand around the key, feeling the sharp edges press against my palm. It was a reminder. It was a trophy. It was a promise. So I bought the lock. I whispered to the empty room, and I kept the key. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been an incredible journey exploring the depths of Avery's revenge and her fight for freedom. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please drop a comment below and tell me which country or city you are listening in. And let me know what you thought of Avery's final move. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video get discovered by more people who love a good drama. See you in the next story.